All right. Hey everyone, welcome to the Be Insightful in Technology podcast. I'm your host, Shikirah Johnson, aka Shy, and I'm here to help you gain knowledge, wisdom, and understanding to be insightful in technology. So today's guest was actually referenced to me by my mentor, and after speaking with her for a while, I was excited to have her on the podcast. I do feel like a lot of our situations are pretty similar, which I do want to express more of to help other women that are looking to join the industry, let them know that it's a way. It may be hard, but it is definitely a way to get in here. So I'm going to let her introduce herself and then we can get into the podcast. So Rochelle is her name, but I'm going to let you guys know who she is, what she does, and like how people can find her if she's on LinkedIn or any social media platforms.
Right. Well, hello, Shikirah. I'm here. I so enjoyed meeting you the other day and talking. My name is Rochelle Rivers. Your mentor, Chris Maxwell, is a high school friend of mine. So we met long time ago, long before I had a passion, long before I knew what it was, long before I got to this place. But I am an IT manager. I write process for the service assurance part of SD-WAN services. I work with companies such as VMware, Cisco, Aruba, all of the big companies doing SD-WAN and networking. How I got here is an interesting story, one that kind of haphazardly happened, but I'm here. I claim my space, and I am welcoming anyone who looks like me to try to help them come along as well.
Oh, I like that you said you claim your space because a lot of times
Absolutely.
in these places we feel unwelcome and we kind of shy away from the things that we've worked hard for.
Right.
So I can't wait to dive into your journey into this. So are you on any social media platforms?
I am on LinkedIn. I'm Rochelle Rivers on LinkedIn. Just search that. You can find me there. It really speaks to what I do. I work for AT&T. I've been in telecommunications now for 35 years. That platform highlights what I've done. It highlights my education. I've gotten a bachelor's degree and 2 master's degrees, all in pursuit of what I thought was my passion. Some of those degrees actually flow into what I do now, and maybe some of them did not, but they were part of the journey and very necessary in helping me learn how to figure out what I wanted to do and how to settle in where I am.
Oh, that's great. I'll make sure to include her LinkedIn in the show notes so you guys can connect with her. I will say, as I was going through it, I was just thinking, like, you've had job security.
I don't know if I've had job security. I've had a job for a while, and I've been grateful for that. There was a period where I did get laid off from AT&T, but because of my work ethic, and that's what I was told, and what I brought to that organization when they had a chance to call me back, they did. So I didn't lose any time with the company. I was only gone for about 6 months, and when they had an opportunity to bring some people back, I was told you came to mind immediately and I wanted you back. So I didn't lose any time. So things can happen in corporate. I've been very fortunate to find myself in positions that were very comfortable, but never from a space of, oh, yeah, I'm sure I'll be here for a while, because corporate is corporate and you never know.
Especially like I'm realizing now, so early in my career, there is a lot of shift and changing that
Yes,
will
it is.
occur
Yes,
whether
it
you
is.
wanted to or not. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
all right, let's dive into like how did you find your passion? Like what inspired you along the way to continue going through it?
Well, when I started with AT&T, some 35 years ago, I was an entry-level part-time employee taking phone calls, trying to help people with their long-distance service and whatever long-distance service plan they wanted. So I had no idea, no thoughts of passion, what I wanted to do, even if this was going to be a long-term situation. I needed a part-time job. I was in college. I was at Georgia State. My friends were like, hey, we heard AT&T is hiring. Okay, well, let me go get a job. I need that. So as I started working, and I realized, because I had no concept of what is a good company, what's not a good company. I was 20 years old. We don't have any understanding of that at that age. So I started working, and I realized, hearing some of the things that some of my coworkers were going through, I'm like, okay, so they'll pay for me to go to school and they can do this and I can get insurance, because that was never a part of my reality prior to that time. So I made some decisions to kind of hang around and try to promote up within the company, still having no idea where it would go, what it would lead to, or how I would fare in that. So I started moving around, but everything was still very entry level, very clerical type work. And I knew that I knew that was not for me. So I started, running into, places of frustration in that space, mostly because I had no job fulfillment. I was not satisfied with what I was doing. It was very mundane, very routine. I could do it almost with my eyes closed, no satisfaction there. So I decided to look a little further and say, okay, well, what else does the company have to offer, as opposed to those positions that seemingly were dropped in my lap just based on what was happening around me. So I started digging and I found out about a job that the company had that was called communications technician. I asked around to many of the people that work there, and I was like, well, what do they do? How do you become one? What is that? The name intrigued me, but I had no true understanding as to why it was intriguing. I didn't know they were making more money than I was making. That was intriguing all by itself. So I started digging around and I found out, well, it's technical, it's electrical, there's some testing that you have to do. Okay, well, sign me up. I had always considered myself a pretty good student. I was a good test taker. So if that's what we got to do, sign me up. So I went through that process. I became a technician. And it was then that I realized I had met my job match. This is where I belong. The problem solving, the troubleshooting, the seeking resolutions, and having something that you could say you completed, you did. That initial job was installing T1s and sometimes T3s and some lower speed circuits, 56K, 64K. But it was a sense of accomplishment to get a circuit in and working, tested with the customer, and it's working as they wanted it. That was the first time I ever felt a sense of satisfaction with my job. And I was like, this is what they mean when you hear the term, that's a good job match, because I felt like this is what I was born to do. The back and forth with the techs at the site, trying to troubleshoot a problem that came up, trying to come up with different ideas or things when what we were trying wasn't working. It was like, okay, well, I had to put my thinking cap on. Okay, well, have we tried this? Or let's consider this, or let's troubleshoot in a different way. That I came alive. I was like, this is what I'm supposed to do. So I did that job for almost, almost 20 years. Almost, well, no, not 20, maybe 10 years. I did that job for a good 10 years. And that was the position that I held where I was laid off. I was a union employee at the time. Everything was based on seniority. So when they were doing downsizing and things like that, it had nothing to do with your ability. It had everything to do with your seniority. So if your seniority was right or wrong, then you would get laid off. And that's just what it was. It had nothing to do with you. So when that day came for me, I wasn't dejected because I felt like, okay, so if I found this job with AT&T, there are other companies, because I knew some of the companies that I had worked for, and Lucent and Verizon, and they were at Bell South, because we had divested from Bell South at the time. It was AT&T and Bell South. So these were other companies that I could potentially go to and do this same job or something similar. So I wasn't dejected, but I did welcome the break for a moment. My son was a teenager. He was getting ready to go to high school. So I was enjoying just a little bit of downtime. I took some classes to do something else, because I always like having a little side gig. So I took some classes AT&T was paying. So I did that. And then 6 months into that layoff, I got a call from the director of my organization saying, hey, and she and I were good friends. She said, hey, we're calling some people back. We got a project that's coming in, and I need some people that I know can get the job done and can come in, hit the ground running with little or no training to get back up to speed. And of course, you came to mind, and I'm calling. I want to know if you want to come back. And I'm thinking, absolutely, I want to come back. My son's getting ready to go to high school, and he's in private school, and high school is going to be more expensive, and college is in a few years. And yes, I do want to come back. So I came back, and I didn't, like I said, I didn't lose any time. I lost nothing. And when I came back, I did that same job for about another year. And then things were changing in the company. And that director that called me back, she had been constantly pushing me and another couple of employees to leave the occupational ranks and go into management. And there was pushback only because of my ignorance and not understanding and not knowing and it being unfamiliar and having been in that space for so long. So finally, with the changes that were occurring, she called me into her office and she said, go into management. She said, there's usually a process that you got to go through, a whole rigmarole. She said, we're not doing that with you. I know you're ready. Go into management. She said, I'm sending you an email and I need you to start the process. She said, and as you complete each task, it's going to go to your immediate supervisor. It's going to go to your second level, and then it's going to come to me. And we're all going to approve it because that's where you need to be. So I said, okay, well, that's where I'm going. So I did that. And immediately everything unfolded as she said. I went to then, because changes were happening in that organization, I applied for a job still in the technical world. I applied for another job. They called me. I applied on Friday. They called me on Monday and said, hey, this isn't an interview. The job is yours if you want it. But I need to tell you that it's a maintenance position, which means the office is 24/7. So there will be some weekend work, because up until then I had never done weekend work. And I said, well, how often will I be working weekends? Because I had a teenage son that played sports, and the weekends was when he played. So he said, maybe once or twice. He said, no, maybe once every 2 months. And I was like, oh, okay, I can manage that. I can work with that. So I started that job. And what that job was a more intense version of the previous job. So I was still in my element. I was still problem solving. I was still troubleshooting. I still felt in certain situations a sense of accomplishment, a sense of completion, even though there were occasions when I didn't, because we would get trouble tickets. We would have to do a little bit of research, figure out what was going on, send the ticket out to whatever office the issue was in. And sometimes when you do that, there is no sense of completion, because I figured out what the problem is and I sent it out. They may not call back to work on it during my shift. They may call back during another shift, or when they call back, they may reach one of my peers who may work with them to completion.
You want to be able to see it all the way through.
Right. And so I didn't get to do that, but the work was still fulfilling because I did solve some problems, get customers back up that were down, because just like the tickets that I sent out may come back to other people's tickets sometimes came back to me. So although I may not have been the one to send it out, I'm the one who's doing the work on it, and I may be able to see that to completion. So I really enjoyed that. And I stayed there for quite a while as well, out of comfort, out of familiarity, out of, I like what I do. But then I just got this itch that there's more, and I want to do more, and I want to assume more responsibility. I want to, step up to the next level. With that comes more opportunity, more compensation, more, and I felt like I was ready for more. So I started applying, and ultimately I ended up where I am now as a senior product development engineer, where I write process, as I mentioned, for the SD-WAN services that we sell in conjunction with VMware, Cisco, Aruba, and a host of other companies that we work with, a CDN, and there's just quite a few that we work with. And I was told by a lot of people, why did you do that? Why would you leave what you knew to go to something that you don't know? Because this was totally out of my wheelhouse, totally out of my wheelhouse. I was used to working with equipment and layer one service. This is software. So this is not layer one. This is layer 3, 4, and above. And I always stretch myself. I always reach for more. I have allowed myself to get comfortable in the past. As I mentioned, I stayed in a couple of jobs for several years. Part of that was because when you have kids, sometimes it's just easier to manage life when you have something that's familiar. Your coworkers are familiar. You need to take time off. You got kids, they're understanding because they know you, they know the kids. So once my son was no longer a kid and he was gone to college and doing his thing, that's when I started, trying to move around. But I have always been someone that was reaching for more, wanting to learn whatever I could, wanting to know as much about what was placed in front of me, doing the homework, studying afterwards. I was sitting here in my office today, and my boss handed me last week a new project that he wants me to work on, which, strangely enough, is directly related to what I used to do years ago as a technician. He was like, there's so few people in the company that have the knowledge of that old technology. And I'm like, well, yeah, I got it, but that was a long time ago. So I'm trying to rack my brain. But I know a lot of people that still do that. So I'm chilling, but I was like, you know what? Let me reach out to some old coworkers and get up to speed on how that works so that when I go into a meeting tomorrow with my supervisor, I've got a little bit more information. So it's always learning, always striving. It's never an off button. And even when I'm off, like I was off last Friday, I had taken the day off, and he sends me a message, hey, we got a call tomorrow. I need you on that call, but I see that you're out of office. And my response is, I'll be available for the call because I love what I do. I like it. I like to be a part of the solution when I recognize what the problem is. So that's how I got here.
I really do want to like deep dive into some parts of your journey real quick because I do like some of the stuff that you said, especially about, for me, I can't turn it off either. Where it's just like when you get to something that you really enjoy, it's really hard to let it go.
Absolutely.
And and it's been a lot of, I think during the pandemic and before the pandemic a little bit, we were easing into this heavy work-life balance, like push with everybody, especially when
Mm-hmm.
everybody was remote. It was like, hey, separate work and life and enjoy
Right.
yourselves, be able to balance both out. But when it becomes your work, it's like intertwined with like your interests in life as well. It kind of is gonna mesh. It really will.
Right.
And one thing that I really want to dive in for your journey is the transition between very technical and then managerial type of work. So for you, it sounded like you had to be pushed into doing it because it's like they
Well,
know you have it
I
in
had
you.
to, right. I did have to get pushed into management because I thought that it would take me away from the technical. What I did not realize was that there are so many technical positions, even as a manager. I don't manage people, I'm an individual contributor. So, although I have a management title, I'm still a techie at heart. I still do that work. I just do it now from a software perspective as opposed to a hardware perspective. And I didn't understand that initially. And that's why I was reluctant to go into management because I'm thinking, I like what I do. Why would I stop doing this? But the very first job that I had when I went into management, I was doing literally the same thing. It was a different title. That particular organization did not have communications technicians. They were level 1 managers. So I was in management, but I was doing technically the same job that I was doing as a technician. I didn't understand that that's how it was going to work. And when I did, I was like, I should have made this leap a long time ago, but I didn't understand. And instead of trying to figure that out, I was like, but I'm good right here. I like what I do. It's working for me. I'm staying right here. So when I got pushed out of the nest, so to speak, I realized, oh, I like it out here. So that's why it was such an easy transition for me to go from being a occupational union employee into management because the work didn't change for me.
Oh, I like that you mentioned that because I for one do have the assumption like managerial stuff takes you away from the technical aspect of it because of just the general thought process we have about managers. Like they're
Right.
solely here to manage people, and it's like technical stuff, you got to step away from it.
Sometimes you have
So
to manage products, projects. Sometimes you have to manage the process. And those aren't people. And when you don't have to manage people, your hands are still in the mix of everything technical. Because most of the people that I work with, including myself, we're all very technical, but we don't work on layer one, which is what I was familiar with. We're, 2, 3, 4, all the way up the OSI model, so it's still technical. It's just a different perspective of that technical. So management doesn't mean that you're just, watching over people, making sure they come into the office on time. And that's what I didn't want to do. So I am not a supervisor manager. I'm an individual contributor in the technical
no,
space.
I do like that track being available because not that many people know
Absolutely.
about that.
No, they
So
don't. They do not.
I'm glad that you're here to talk about it. Another thing about your journey as well is how did you prepare for the technical? Like you talked about how like nobody really knew what the communications technician did. And then it's just like, okay, how did you get to, transitioning from doing the clerical work to the technical work?
That was a journey because as I mentioned, every time I asked someone what do they do, I kept getting a very generic, I don't know, but I think they make a lot of money. So I was like, okay, well, that was just fueling my desire to know more. So I started calling around. I decided to call into our HR center for training and none of this stuff was online in 96 because that's when it was for me. That's when I was doing all this calling. So I called into HR and I said I wanted to find out how does one become a communications technician. And the lady on the phone, she was like, well, you have to take a test, and when you take the test, if you pass the test, then you can automatically go into the system, which was on the phone at the time. That's how technical we were then, because nothing was online. Call in, you put in certain information, and then you ask for certain jobs, and the jobs come up. So I said, okay, well, how do I take this test? Or is there anything? She said it's a test about electronics and it has electrical information in it. And I'm thinking, I don't know anything about that. I said, well, is there any like study guide or study information or classes that help you? And she said, well, there is a little, we do have some information I can send you that gives you like a sample of some of the questions. And I said, okay. So she sent that to me, company mail. So I got it probably within the next couple of days. And it had like 4 questions, but this is a test that had like 150 questions on it. So 4 questions was not even going to give me an inkling of what I was actually looking, that I was going to have to actually do. So I called back and I said, is there any way or anybody that's offering any classes to help you prepare for the test? And she said, absolutely, there are. She said, as a matter of fact, there's one that's getting ready to get started. I'll give you the instructor's information. So she did. And AT&T has always been very good with training and offering classes and paying for classes and all of that. So I called the instructor, and the instructor says, she gives me some great information about the class. And I said, well, I want to sign up. What do I have to do? And she says, well, you can't. And I said, well, why not? The class hasn't started. It doesn't start for another week or so. Why can't I sign up? She says, because I had orientation this past weekend, and I usually don't let people in my class who don't attend the orientation. And I said, well, why is that? And she said, because I provide some information that I think is very helpful and very useful for the class. So I'm thinking, well, it's not the class. So what are you saying in the orientation that is necessary for the class? And so she said, I stress the importance of being in the class every day or every class session, showing up, being prepared, and being ready, because it's a lot of information. It's very comprehensive. And when you start missing, you miss out on something that you will need for the next class. So if you miss a class and then you come back, you're kind of behind. That means everybody else would have to slow down trying to help you get up to speed so that the class will continue. I told her, I said, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm also a full-time student at Georgia State. I understand the importance of being in class on time all the time. I said, if you let me in this class, I will not ever miss a class. So after speaking with her for just a few more minutes, I think she felt a level of conviction, a sense of seriousness. And she said, okay, I'm going to make an exception this time. So I started the class totally lost. I had not ever done anything with electronics or with electricity or anything technical prior to then, but I had to honor my commitment of coming to class every week. So while I'm here, I might as well learn something. And I am fortunate that as I've gone through school, if I listened, I would always absorb and be able to take something from that. So I played that strength up. I took lots of notes. I had a little recorder because we didn't have phones like we got today. So I had a little recorder that I could record and go back and listen to, like on the way home or once I got home or on the way to work throughout the week, so that I could try to keep up to speed, because I was determined that I was going to become this person, this communications technician. So I was able to take the test. And turns out I was the only one of the 7 or 8 people that passed the test on that session. I immediately applied for a job and I got it. They were taking people who could pass the test like that. I mean, if you could pass, then you knew that you were going to have a job, because they were waiting on people to pass the test. So once I passed the test, I got the job. I was there. But I will say this, that test had absolutely nothing to do with the job. And everything that I learned about the job was literally OJT. I learned it on the job. And I sat with other guys who had been technicians for years. They had, at the time, I probably had about 8 years service. These guys had 25, 30 years service. I'm thinking, oh my God, you ain't got nothing else to do with your life. You're going to be here forever. Who knew I was going to be one of those people? But, you know, they taught me well. They were willing to teach. But, they were guys, and they were trying to teach a woman in a very male dominated space. And I had to be thick skinned. I had to be, I could not show emotion that we tend to show. I couldn't get, angry or upset about things that were happening or weren't happening. I had to maintain my control of that, because I didn't want to be labeled and I didn't want to appear weak, like I couldn't handle it, because that's what I felt like they were looking for. As much as some were very helpful, there were others who were kind of sitting around waiting to see if I was going to fail, maybe even secretly hoping that I would fail, to prove that we didn't have a right there. And the crazy thing is, that was in 1996. Why are you still waiting on my failure? So I did get with some guys that were very welcoming and very encouraging and very interested in helping me learn. And that's what they did. They taught me what I needed to know. And it was in that process that I learned that not only is this exactly what I want and where I need to be, this role fits my personality. This is what I'm supposed to be doing.
If you like what you're listening to, tune in next week to hear part 2 of Rochelle's journey. Thank you guys for tuning in to gain some knowledge, wisdom, and understanding to be insightful in technology.